My name is Marie, and when I was just 22, I looked back on the moment my world cracked open. At 15 years old, I learned that my parents would not pay for the treatment that could save my life. Instead, they decided that money was better spent on my brother's education. Thankfully, my aunt stepped in and rescued me. But behind the scenes, I made a choice of my own, one they would regret for years afterward. If you've ever felt betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect you, you'll understand my story. I was still just a teenager when I realized my survival wasn't worth as much as a college degree. I can picture it perfectly. My mom across the kitchen table, her hands neatly folded as if we were deciding what to cook for dinner, not whether I would live or die. My dad stood behind her, arms crossed, wordless as always. They had just gotten off a call with the insurance company. I already knew the treatment wouldn't be covered. I knew it was going to cost a lot, but I also believed, truly believed, they had savings. Not a fortune, but enough. They had mentioned it more than once. So I asked quietly, "What happens now?" My mom gave me that strangely calm expression she always wore when she was about to deliver bad news. "We've decided not to go ahead with the treatment." For a moment, I didn't even process what she meant. I thought she was saying they wanted to double-check with another doctor or maybe wait for more details. I was puzzled, not afraid. "What are you talking about?" I asked. She sighed like I was dragging the conversation out unnecessarily. "Honey, we've discussed this. Your dad and I believe that if it's meant to be, God will find a way." I blinked at her, stunned. "What?" Then my dad finally opened his mouth. "We can't put every cent we have into this. Caleb starts university next year. His tuition, housing, his entire future is already set up. We can't risk throwing all of that away." And for a second, I couldn't even breathe. I wasn't blind. I always knew Caleb was the favorite. He was their pride, their shining sun. He got the brand new clothes, the tutoring, the summer programs. I got what was left behind. But even so, I never believed they would actually let me die. "You're picking college over me." The words came out so small I barely recognized my own voice. My mom's face twisted, almost offended. "Don't put it like that. This isn't a choice. We're simply leaving it in God's hands." My chest pounded so hard I could hear nothing else. I wanted to scream, to smash a glass, to sob until I couldn't breathe. But I didn't. I just stood, walked to my room, and shut the door. I didn't come out that night. They didn't bother to check on me. That was the instant it became clear. If I wanted to live, I had to figure it out myself. So I opened my laptop and began searching. Can a minor disown their parents for medical neglect? Answer, yes. Would foster care provide healthcare? Answer, it can. Do kids in juvenile detention still receive medical treatment? And I'm not exaggerating. For a while, I truly considered committing a crime, just serious enough to get me locked up, but not so severe that I'd be stuck forever. I figured jail had to have some kind of medical care, right? Sounds ridiculous now. But at the time, I was desperate. I found out I could file for emancipation, but it usually required parental consent or a judge's ruling, which would take time. I didn't have. There were shelters, but they were full or too far, and I didn't want to go to some stranger. Then I thought of Ruth, my mom's older sister. She lived about 40 minutes away. We didn't see her often. My parents used to talk about her like she was some sad little failure. Said she lived in a shoebox apartment and worked part-time tutoring kids who barely passed. They laughed at her for never getting married, for throwing her money away on stray animals and takeout food. But I remembered her being kind. Every time we did see her, she made a point to talk to me. Not just hello, how are you talk, but real talk. She looked at me like she actually saw me, like she cared. So I didn't reach out. Not yet. I wasn't ready to ask for help. I just wanted to survive the night. I packed a bag, some clothes, my iPad charger. I took the little bit of cash I had hidden in a jar in my closet, maybe $70 total. I waited until after midnight, listened to the creak of the holey floorboards, the click of their bedroom door. And then I left just like that. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I walked 5 blocks before I found a bench near the 24-hour grocery store. I sat there for a long time just thinking. I thought about how I used to believe my parents loved me. Not the way they loved Caleb, sure. But I thought maybe deep down they still cared. I thought about the way my mom had held my hand when I was little. How she used to read to me at night before Caleb started middle school, and everything shifted. I thought about my dad teaching him how to drive while I sat inside doing dishes. And I thought about how now that I needed them most, they'd chosen to spend that money on someone else. Not a stranger, not a neighbor, my brother, and not just for anything, for college, as if that somehow mattered more than whether I lived to see 16. I sat on that bench until the sky started to lighten. I didn't cry. I just planned. I wasn't going back. Whatever happened next, whatever I had to do, wherever I had to go, I was going to find a way to stay alive without them. I didn't sleep that first night. I watched the sky change from black to gray, then to gold as the sun came up. People passed me on the sidewalk, some with coffee cups, some walking dogs, a few in suits with their heads down. No one looked at me. I think that's what hit me hardest. How invisible I was. Just a girl on a bench with a backpack. No one stopped to ask if I was okay. Not that I expected them to. I was used to not being seen. I'd gotten good at it. Not in a sad, melodramatic way. Just in a quiet, practiced way. I knew how to disappear in plain sight. How to take up as little space as possible. That's what it had been like at home for as long as I could remember. My parents weren't abusive in the way people expect. They didn't yell or hit or lock me in a closet. They didn't need to. Ignoring someone completely is its own kind of violence. Caleb, my older brother, was the star the day he was born. I think the spotlight just permanently snapped toward him. And when I came along 2 years later, I was an afterthought. They'd never say that out loud. Of course, they'd smile and say they loved us equally. But it was a lie so thin you could see through it with your eyes closed. When Caleb got sick, it was a family emergency. Everyone dropped what they were doing. When I got sick, I was told to drink some tea and rest. When he won a science fair, my parents threw a party. When I placed second in a writing competition, my mom said, "That's nice, sweetie. Can you set the table now?" It wasn't just big moments, either. It was the small constant choices. Caleb got new shoes every semester. Nikes, always name brand. I wore the same pair for 2 years until they split at the heel. He got a laptop for school when he turned 13. I got a hand-me-down that barely turned on. He got driving lessons. I got told we'd figure it out later, and I believed it would come later. That eventually it would be my turn. That if I just worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, proved myself enough, they'd see me. I spent years trying to earn their attention, like it was a scholarship. One time in 7th grade, I got a perfect report card. Straight A's. I showed it to my dad, proud for once, hopeful. He glanced at it and said, "That's expected of you." Caleb struggles more, so his achievements mean more. I felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. I didn't show him my grades after that. Even birthdays were different. Caleb always got a party, balloons, gifts, a fancy cake with his name written in blue icing. My 15th birthday, my mom forgot. I only got a text that said, "Oh, happy birthday. Sorry, busy day at work." I remember reading it while sitting alone at the bus stop after school. I'd bought myself a cupcake from the cafeteria and ate it while waiting for the ride home. I wasn't angry. Not exactly, just numb. But even with all of that, I never thought they'd let me die. That's the part that still doesn't feel real sometimes. I thought they loved me, even if it wasn't the same way they loved Caleb. I thought if it came down to it, if my life was on the line, they'd step up. They didn't. They chose him. But this time, it wasn't over a pair of shoes or a school trip or a birthday. It was my life. And they walked away from it like it was nothing. I tried to tell myself they were scared. that maybe they didn't understand the diagnosis or they were overwhelmed. But I'd seen their faces, calm, steady, resigned. They had known what they were doing. That's what sent me running. Not just fear, but clarity. I wasn't safe in that house. Not because they'd hurt me, but because they wouldn't save me. So I ran, and now I was sitting on a park bench with a backpack full of clothes and $73 in cash. I didn't know where I was going yet. I just knew I wasn't going back. For a second, I thought about calling my school counselor, but I knew how that would go. Mandatory reports, child services, maybe foster care, maybe worse. I'd seen enough news stories to know that even well-meaning systems don't always protect kids. Then I thought about Ruth, my mom's sister, the only adult in my life who ever treated me like I mattered. I hadn't seen her in almost a year. My parents didn't like inviting her over, said she was negative and always judging. In reality, I think she just made them uncomfortable because she saw through them. She never bought into the perfect family act. Once, when I was maybe 10, I overheard my mom on the phone with Ruth. They were arguing. My mom said, "We're doing fine, Ruth. You don't need to lecture us on parenting." Ruth's voice came through the speaker, sharp and clear. "I'm not lecturing. I'm just wondering why. Marie looks like she hasn't been hugged in weeks." That sentence hit me like a truck. Guess it was true. She saw me even then. And now, sitting on a park bench with the morning sun warming my back and nothing but fear in my chest, I realized something. She was the only person in the world I trusted. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe she'd let me crash on her couch for a night or two. Maybe she'd help me figure out how to talk to someone, find a social worker, apply for help. I didn't expect anything more than that because Ruth was poor. My parents never stopped reminding me of that. She can barely take care of herself. My dad would mutter, "Lives like a hermit." My mom added, "You should feel lucky we provide what she can't." I didn't believe them. Not really. But their words echoed in my head now as I pulled my phone from my pocket and stared at her number. My hands shook as I dialed. The phone rang once, twice. Then she picked up. "Hello?" I opened my mouth, and for the first time since leaving home, I felt tears burning at the edges of my eyes. "Ruth," I said. "It's me, Marie." I waited for her to ask what was wrong to sound confused. She didn't. She just said, "Where are you?" And when I told her, she said two words I'll never forget. "Stay there. He was coming." She pulled up 10 minutes later in a faded red car with one window that wouldn't roll up all the way. The moment I saw her, I nearly lost it. My legs felt numb, like I'd forgotten how to stand. I grabbed my bag and moved toward the car before she could even park properly. She got out, eyes scanning me head to toe like she was checking if I was real. I didn't know what to expect. Shock, questions, maybe even a lecture. But she didn't say anything, just opened her arms, and I walked into them like I'd been waiting my whole life to be held. She didn't ask why I was there, didn't ask what happened. She just said, "Let's get you warm." We drove in silence most of the way. I stared out the window and she didn't press me. That's what I always liked about Ruth. She never forced closeness. She made room for it. Her apartment was small, really small. It was one of those older buildings with creaky floors and windows that rattled when the wind blew. But it smelled like cinnamon and clean laundry. And for the first time in days, I felt something close to safe. I offered to sleep on the floor that I could just crash for one night to max. She didn't even respond to that, just handed me a pair of soft pajamas and said, "You're taking the bed. I've got the couch." I didn't argue. I didn't have it in me. That night, I curled up under a warm quilt that smelled like her and let the warmth settle into my bones. For the first time since the diagnosis, I slept. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of eggs cracking in the kitchen. I hadn't heard that sound in a long time. At home, breakfast meant a granola bar and a reminder not to make the counters messy. Ruth handed me a plate without asking if I was hungry. I hadn't realized how starving I was until I started eating. When I was halfway through, she finally asked, "Are you ready to tell me what happened?" I froze. I hadn't planned how to say it. It all still felt unreal, like I'd made it up. I swallowed, put my fork down, and told her everything about the doctor's appointment, about the diagnosis, about how my parents set me down, and said word for word, "We can't afford both," about how they wanted to leave it in God's hands. Her face didn't change as I spoke, but I could see the way her grip tightened around her mug, how her shoulders went stiff and sharp. I told her about the research I did that night, how I Googled whether I'd get free treatment if I was a ward of the state, how I thought about getting arrested just to qualify for care, and how when none of that felt right, I packed a bag and left. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You're not going back there." It wasn't a question. I looked at her unsure. "But your apartment, there's barely room." "I know you don't have." She cut me off. "Don't worry about what I don't have. Worry about staying alive. We'll figure the rest out." I didn't cry, but something cracked in me that morning. Something I didn't know I'd been holding up all this time, because she didn't say, "Let's think about it." She didn't say, "I'll call them." She didn't say, "Let me see what I can do." She said, "You're not going back," like it was already decided, like she'd known it from the moment she picked up the phone. That afternoon, she started making calls. She got a list of doctors, clinics, specialists. She asked about payment plans, told them the situation straight. She's 15. Her parents are paying. I'll cover what I can. When one place quoted a number that made me feel sick, she didn't flinch. She just nodded and said, "Okay, thank you." Then she started making other calls. I overheard her talking to a friend, asking if they knew anyone who might want to sublet a room or split an apartment or even buy a small condo. The next day, I watched her take a folder out of a drawer and flip through paperwork, deeds, retirement accounts, bonds. She sat with a calculator, silent, making lists. I tried to stop her. "Ruth, you don't have to do this," I said. "This isn't your responsibility." She looked up at me. "Your family, my parents, are nothing to me anymore." She finished. Her voice was calm, steady. "You are, that's all that matters." By the end of the week, she'd put her condo on the market. It was a tiny place, but it was hers. Paid off, cozy, full of books and memories and chipped mugs she refused to throw away. And she was selling it for me. She never made a big speech, never said, "Look what I'm giving up," never cried or asked for anything in return. Just said, "The sooner we get you treatment, the better." That's when I broke. I didn't sob. It wasn't messy. I just sat on the couch and let a single tear slide down my cheek and said, "I didn't think anyone would do this for me." She came and sat beside me. Didn't say anything, just tugged my hand. That night, I lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about how differently things could have gone if I'd stayed home, if I'd waited, if I hadn't called her. I thought about what my parents would say if they knew where I was, what they'd do if they realized someone else had stepped in where they wouldn't. And I thought for the first time about how much power they'd given up when they made their choice. They'd written me off, but I was still here, and thanks to Ruth, I was going to stay here, alive, healing, watching. They didn't know it yet, but their decision was going to come back to them soon. I would do something that would change everything. The first few weeks after my treatment ended were the hardest. People think recovery is this glorious upward climb, like the worst is over and everything just gets better. But it's not. It's messy and slow. It's full of side effects and strange pain and long stretches of feeling stuck between getting better and still being broken. Ruth didn't rush me. She cooked, cleaned, handled the bills, sat with me in silence when I didn't feel like talking, and listened without interruption when I did. She treated my healing like it was the most important project in the world. And somehow, little by little, I came back. My body stopped shaking when I stood too long. I could keep food down. I started walking further each day, talking more, sleeping more than an hour at a time. I still had nothing to give her, not then, but I promised myself that when the time came, she would never want for anything again. And even as I worked on getting stronger, I felt something else building inside me. Not anger, not hate, just this cold, steady knowledge that I couldn't let what they did disappear into silence. They tried to erase me. They'd written me off like a bad investment. And yet, I was still here, breathing, healing, watching. So, I started thinking about how to make it matter. I didn't want a viral post, or a screaming match, or some long-winded letter about how much they'd hurt me. What I wanted was for the right person to know. The one person whose opinion they ripped. Growing up, there were always certain rules in our house, things that didn't make sense to outsiders, like how we weren't allowed to eat in the living room on certain nights, or why my mom would buy expensive wine we weren't allowed to open. It was all about preparing for him. Dr. Malcolm Avery, he was the kingmaker, ran the National Private Admissions Consortium, former Ivy League dean, respected, and touchable. He came to dinner once when I was 11. I wore a dress I hated and was told not to speak unless spoken to. I remember that night down to the smell of the overcooked salmon my mom ruined because she was too nervous to pay attention to the oven. Caleb showed him a science project. My parents laughed loudly at his jokes. They kept slipping in their client stats, their student success stories, their whole pitch wrapped in casual conversation. Me, I was there to smile, nod, and stay quiet. After he left, my parents bust like they'd just seen God. If we get Avery's trust, we're set, my dad said. That's all it takes. They spent the next decade obsessed with that man's approval. So, when I was finally strong enough to sit at my desk without my legs shaking, I opened a blank email, and I wrote the truth. Not just a will be sturdy rant, just facts. I told him who I was, that I had met him once, that I was the daughter of Victor and Melissa Hart, and that when I was 15, I got sick, and that they had the money to help me, but they decided to save it for my brother's education. I told him I ran away, that my aunt took me in, that she sold her home, her savings, everything she had to keep me alive. I told him that my parents were still out there running a business based on the image of a loving, principled family, one that put children first. I attached proof, a rejection letter from the treatment center listing the exact cost, a text message from my mom telling Caleb to ignore me. She'll come back when she's tired of acting out. A screenshot of my dad writing, can't throw it all away on a gamble. And then I ended the message with one line. I thought, you should know what kind of people you're working with. I stared at the screen for a long time before hitting send, not because I was scared, but because I knew the second I pressed that button, things would never be the same again. I didn't tell Ruth. I didn't need her to talk me out of it, or worse, to try to protect me from what might happen next. She'd already done enough. This part was mine. It was quiet, clean, private. And when I finally hit send, I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and poured myself a glass of water with hands that didn't shake anymore. I didn't know when things would start. I didn't even know if he'd respond. But I knew the one thing that mattered most. I had said exactly what needed to be said to the only person who mattered in their world. I didn't need to scream. I just had to whisper in the right ear. I didn't hear back from Dr. Avery. I didn't expect to. But a few weeks after I sent the message, I noticed something strange. The badge on my parents' website, the one from the consortium, was gone. It had always been front and center. They used to brag about it constantly. Endorsed by Avery. They'd say he only works with the best. Now it was just missing. I checked the consortium's directory. Their name had been quietly removed. No announcement, no drama, just one clean cut. And then it began. At first, It was little things. Their business page, which used to be full of 5-star reviews and glowing testimonials, started losing traction. A few reviews disappeared entirely. One school they were closely partnered with dropped them from a speaking panel without explanation. They posted less. Their smiles looked tighter. Then the real damage started. Rumors and parent groups posts hinting at unethical practices. One client pulled their contract and requested a full refund. They tried to pivot. New branding, new packages, even a name change. It didn't work. Their phones stopped ringing. Their inbox went silent. Clients ghosted them. Schools cut ties. Their reputation, once the entire foundation of their business, had collapsed without a sound. 6 months later, I heard they had to shut down their office. They moved everything into their home, then lost that too. I found out through a post on a local forum. Someone asking if anyone knew a cheap real estate agent because a couple in education consulting just defaulted. The address matched. They moved into a rental a worse part of town, still together, but barely. Not out of love, out of necessity. I heard they fought constantly. Neighbors reported shouting once the police were called. They didn't split. Maybe they couldn't afford to. Maybe they knew no one else would want them. And through all of it, I stayed silent. I didn't gloat. I didn't reach out. I just watched and I built. By the time I was 19, I had turned my tutoring side hustle into a full-time business. I specialized in helping kids with college essays, especially the ones who didn't have picture-perfect lives. I understood how to make their stories real, how to make them count. Word spread. Clients poured in. I brought Ruth on full-time. Admin, scheduling, managing emails. I paid her more than she had ever earned in her entire life. She never once asked for a raise, never requested a single thing, but I gave it anyway because she had given up everything for me. On her birthday, I handed her the keys to a house modest, filled with sunlight, tucked near a lake, with a reading nook and a kitchen that didn't drip. She cried first, then I followed. After that, I booked her a trip to Greece. She had always dreamed of going. She told me she once kept a photo of Santorini taped above her work desk. From the trip, she posted a picture, smiling, glass of wine in hand, the blue sea stretching behind her. Her caption read, "To my wonderful niece, Marie, thank you for giving me a life I never dared to imagine." That post changed everything. It found its way back to them. I don't know if someone forwarded it or if they searched my name out of habit or bitterness, but I knew the exact moment they saw it because only days later, they began reaching out. First came the emails. "We're so glad you're doing well. Let's reconnect. We'd love to talk." I ignored them. Then came the texts, then the phone calls. I changed my number, and then one day I saw them in person. They showed up at an event where I was speaking, a small conference for student mentors. They waited outside until it wrapped up. When I stepped out, they were standing there. For a second, I hardly recognized them. My dad looked worn. His suit hung wrong. His shoes were scuffed and tired. My mom's hair was streaked with gray, her makeup uneven, like she hadn't bothered with it in months. "Marie," she said, her voice unsteady. "Just a moment, please." I didn't move. "We know we failed you," my dad admitted. "We've lost everything," my mom added, stepping closer. "We saw Ruth's post. We didn't realize how far you'd gone, how generous you are." I stared at her. "You mean generous, like paying for someone's treatment so they don't die?" I asked. She winced. My dad tried again. "We were scared. We made mistakes. We didn't think." "No," I cut him off. "You didn't think. You decided I wasn't worth it." "We were under so much pressure," my mom whispered. "We thought Caleb isn't speaking to you either," I said. "Even he knows what you did." Silence fell, heavy and weary. "We're not asking for much," my dad murmured. "Just a little help. We're struggling." I let the quiet linger. Then I said, "You once told me you couldn't afford to keep me alive. I'm only giving you the same answer." My mom's lips shook. My dad turned his eyes away, and I stepped off the curb and walked toward my car. They didn't follow. Later that night, Ruth asked how the talk went. I told her it was fine. I never mentioned them. She smiled, poured tea for us both, and started dreaming up her next trip. I asked her where she wanted to go. She grinned. Somewhere warm with a hammock. We touched our mugs together and I thought, not for the first time. I hadn't just survived. I had built a life. And I built it for the one person who believed I was worth saving.